watch what happens and what actions are taken. And now I want us to talk about the counties and the situation there by first listening to the governors. They spoke last week about their demand for 425 billion shillings as the shareable revenue to the counties.
It's the Constitution of Kenya that split roles between national and county governments. And the Constitution is very clear that resources should follow functions. Based on a reasonable and rational analysis, we have, as a council, put forth 425 billion as being the fair share that we ought to get. CRA also has a position. National Treasury has another position that doesn't agree with ours and with the CRA. So we want to register our disagreement as the process goes to Parliament.
We have also disagreed with the position taken by the National Treasury because they are allocating themselves the functions of the Commission on Revenue Allocations. Because what National Treasury is proposing, the 380 billion, is actually even less than 15%. And that's why we have registered our voice, and we're also continuing to plead with the National Treasury to respect the spirit and the letter of the Constitution and let Commission Revenue Allocation do their roles, and National Treasury should only come in as an arbiter.
All right, so those are the governors, including Governor Baraza, who is on the panel this morning. But the Deputy President spoke to a group of senators last week and said it is not possible. Watch.
425 is good. We can give it to you, but we don't have it. 407 is even better, but we don't have it. We only have 380. So, if you want to hang us, we are helpless. If you want to remove our trousers and whip us on the buttock, go ahead. We don't have the money. Na sisi ni watu ya kuongea ukweli.
Okay, Governor Baraza, I don't know when you're taking action. When are you?
Now, what we said clearly is our demand for 425 billion shillings is based on reasonable analysis of the projected revenue growth. Now, looking at the budget policy statement, it's very clear that revenues are projected to grow from 2.1 trillion shillings to 2.5 trillion shillings. That represents a growth of almost 370 billion Kenya shillings. So what we are saying, because of that growth, as governors, we are only asking for 300, actually an additional 15%, which amounts to 425 billion shillings. That is 55 billion. Now, looking at the proposal from the National Treasury, it does not even represent an equitable share, because 385 billion shillings of 374 as additional is actually less than 5%. And what we are even saying, there are some activities which are supposed to be done at the counties. For example, agriculture is 95% devolved. Look at health, look at water. So when National Treasury is allocating an additional 25 billion shillings to health, National Treasury is allocating an additional 16 billion at water and natural resources, and yet those functions are devolved. As governors, we are saying there are opportunities within the same physical space of the budget policy statement, at least to improve the allocation to counties. But 385 billion shillings is actually way below. And we are very cognizant of the fact that Article 203 has obligations by national government, issues of principal repayment, issues of interest repayment have already been taken care of in the budget policy statement. That will not be interfered with. So it is just reasonable that the National Treasury at least gives us an opportunity to have a conversation around what is equitable. And that is why we are saying Treasury needs at least to comply with the recommendations of Commission Revenue Allocations and readjust the amounts which is being allocated to counties. As you speak right now, We know the Senate has a role to play with regard to the amount that is supposed to go to the Division of Revenue Bill, the Senate Bill 2023. And therefore, we are now looking upon Senate at least to pronounce themselves on whether they support devolution or otherwise. So that's our position. It is not cast in stone, but 385 billion is way below the expectations from governors. Thank you.
And Governor, when you look at the recommendations of the CRA, they are talking about 407 billion as equitable share, then 8.7 billion shillings for the equalization fund. So that's a minimum of 415, but yours is a demand of 425. So are you now saying that if it's 415, that's a better deal, that you can actually work with that? And how does that happen, knowing that all this process is guided by law?
Actually, when you look at what we are talking about, the law gives Commission on Revenue Allocation under Article 215 and 216. It is the Commission on Revenue Allocation which is supposed to make recommendations with regard to revenue allocation. Now, the Commission on Revenue Allocation has made recommendations of 407 billion, excluding equalization fund. I think that will be a good beginning point, as opposed to 385 billion, which is way below the expectation. But then when you look at, when you moved from 321 billion to 370 billion, that represented a 22% increase in revenue. Now, the proposed 385 billion is just a mere 15%. What you're asking for is going to be 16.7% increase. It is not unreasonable. But we can start a conversation right from what the Commission on Revenue Allocation is proposing, and then we also have the issue of the road maintenance levy discussed separately. That will be reasonable, but not 385 billion.
Okay.
And that's why we are saying Senate has a role to play, and they also need to express themselves with what is reasonable to support counties. I know the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, and the president is very clear about the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. You can only spur economic growth if activities are happening at the counties. And what we are saying, we are working for the same people. If the 47 counties succeed economically, then Kenya will grow. So that is the approach I want us to at least start having that conversation.
Okay.
That if counties are doing very well, then definitely Kenya will be okay. If we get that right, then we should not have a problem in allocating the reasonable amount of money to the counties.
All right. And Senator, when you listen to that, like the bare minimum that the governors are willing to take is what CRA has proposed, how would the National Treasury vary that legally?
Thank you, Sam. Let me start with the comment on the clip by the Deputy President, because that was a conversation triggered in the closure of our 3-day seminar in Mombasa. And he was reacting to, of course, an inquiry on the part of the Senate and a presentation by the chairperson of Finance and Budget on the same conversation that Governor Baraza and the Council of Governors are talking about. And true, the role of the Senate is to protect devolution, to ensure that the devolution is also serving the people at the lowest level of political formation, that is at the grassroots level. And when the Deputy President says, we are willing to pay, but we do not have the money, he's picking the conversation from now to answer your concern from Treasury, because we are talking about funding the county governments. We're going back to the conversation we spoke about, the collection of taxes and the funds available for disbursements to the county governments. Where and what I feel should be the heavier conversation and also the need to implement is continuous, regular disbursements of that which is allocated to the counties. Because when we are talking about 425 as a demand from the Council of Governors, we're talking about the Treasury having approved 380. And they are saying, look, according to us, 380 is an additional 10 billion from last year, that is the financial year's allocation.
Right.
And according to them, of course, it is an increase. But when you look at it in the bigger picture, I mean, the cost of living, inflation has gone up, such that even if it is an increase from 370 to 380, from a very objective view, it is not sufficient. But then, what do we do when the National Treasury says these funds, however much we would accept and accede to your demand to increase, is not available? It will make no sense for an increment or for the national government and Treasury to say we will release 425 as demanded, and that money is not released. Because the struggle that we are having right now is that counties have not been...
So for you think we should go with what the National Treasury is saying? Or?
No, we are having the report by the committee depot, I think on the 14th, when we are resuming. That is part of what Senate will do in terms of approvals on the way forward.
Okay.
But then I definitely would go by this with justifications, among them the status of available funds for disbursement.
Okay. Honorable Martha, I almost said Senator, but I wouldn't make a mistake.
Actually, Senator,
you are in the
former
first
Senate.
Yes.
Post-2010 Constitution. You said emeritus.
Yes.
What if she goes back again?
Yeah, you're not sure.
So when these are conversations that have been going on since those days, and especially on the transfer of functions. And the governor here is saying that there are certain functions that in the agriculture sector, in health, but also the rural roads, it never goes. So how do you resolve this at a time that you know that the Ministry of Agriculture at the national level may actually have certain activities they want to finance? How do you deal with that so that you have resources going to the counties, but also maintaining the national level?
Allow me to actually pick from where Honorable Segei has left it, because I think since we were in the Senate of 2013-17, this problem is always a recurring problem. It was there that time, it was there last parliament, it is always there. It's an ending cycle. They will have a proposal, they'll have a wish list, there will be a counter proposal from Treasury. CRA will also have like a middle ground all the time. You know, at the end of it, it's always a back and forth process. But I think what the Deputy President has spoken about is what we also suffered when we were requesting for CDF in Mombasa. And I think members were adamant. We wanted 50%, and we were not leaving Mombasa until we get 50%, which we did not get, by the way, because they sent even the PS to come and tell us the same thing the Deputy President has said. Because you can also not say it's an issue of can't pay, won't pay. You know, you either don't have the resources, even if you hang him, as he says, he doesn't have it. But I think more importantly, there are bigger issues bedeviling devolution. Because at where we are right now, we should be actually at a point where counties actually contribute to get this money. Because they're raising a revenue at the county levels. We should be able to contribute to this basket that we are now asking to get money from. But I think the bigger issues in the room, and I think this maybe is because of the loose nature of the law that governs this money. We have put in PFM Act, 30% should go to development, 70% at maximum should go to recurrent. Right. How many counties are able to hit that? Truly and truthfully speaking, very few, maybe none, that are able to put 30% into development. What we have seen is that counties are left with monies to pay what we call pending bills over and over all the time. Because even the money you see the Council of Governors asking for, some are not just for recurrent. Some will be going to pay some of these pending bills. And the fact that, you know, as a governor, especially for the second termers, you're not coming back. We need to tame that issue, because when you know you're not going to vie again to be a governor, you end up on your final years on a spending spree of what you don't have. Because at the end of the day, the one who comes will deal with it. But I think at the end of the day, and I wish and hope that the Senate can finally crack this, because we were not able to in our Senate, getting a law that actually puts the money, you know the way the CDF law is crafted. And I don't know why we have never been able to get it. That we put monies how they should be spent. You know, we say if you're doing county bursaries, how much or what percentage of the allocation can you put? You know, give a maximum of 30% of 20%, so that we also don't have haphazard development and issues at the county level. So I hope we can eventually crack a law that allocates what money goes where. But in terms of this one, it will eventually be resolved. Okay. I am very hopeful. It's something we have seen before, and I hope that it will take shorter, and then the money be released. I remember we had put, is it 30 days or is it quarterly? I don't know right now how it is, but I hope that when you agree finally, this money is released on time, because that's what we are suffering as CDF right now. Okay. We are looking at June as the closure of financial year, yet the money has not even come. We are at 20% or even less. So let the money be timely, but also let us get a law that allocates how money in the counties are spent. And as Honorable Basil had said, it's not about the money. People want to see what these billions are doing in the counties. Okay. That is what is important. The rest are kizungu mingi, as it says.
And Honorable Ngui, people in Yatta, I mean, what are they saying about devolution? Because the governors will obviously demand for more resources so as to finance the programs they have. But what are they saying in terms of seeing their development programs being implemented or service delivery being implemented, but also the question of on-source revenue? Do they feel the levies and charges from the counties are sufficient, or is it detrimental to their economic fortunes?
Well, thank you, Sam. I think that's a good question. When it comes to devolution, the essence of devolution was actually to revamp the local economies and also bring equity and equality when it comes to development. But if you look at quite a number of areas, there's a lot to be done. And when you look at, if you compare devolution, there are some of the tangible items we can see, but still, I think a lot of the money goes to recurrent expenditures. And this is where we need to do a proper audit, because there are areas where we are even having ghost workers being paid. And when you talk of pending bills, they also need to be audited. And my task actually to the government, if you look at devolution started in 2013, have we ever done an evaluation to see what is working and what is not working? Because if you pilot a particular project, like devolution was piloted in 2013, right, by now we need to know what is working, what is not working. And it is through the evaluation we'll be able to come up with the bills that resonate with the realities and priorities when it comes to what people want to see. Because as we talk today, most of the money that is given to counties goes to pay salaries. So if you talk of paying salaries and you expect to see development, that's why people don't see major projects happening on ground. And we are talking of billions of shillings. If you talk of some small kitty like CDF we receive not more than 60 billion. You know, if you talk of the money we get from CDF, it's something like 60 billion, but there are quite a number of things to be seen. Right. If you talk of education in infrastructure, equality in education has only been seen through CDF. We have new classrooms, new laboratories, you know, and a number of many things. And we have seen quite a number of students attaining higher education through CDF. Right. But when you talk of devolution, quite a number of projects, I don't think they were actually priorities. Okay. Because there are projects which have been done, but those projects do not contribute anything to the economy. Because when you pump money, that money should open the economy so that there can be a way to regenerate more money. Finally, before I end, I would say that when it comes to revenue collection, county level, they need to streamline their revenue collections. They need to invest into technologies. We have seen countries using even GIS mapping to be able to collect or to increase revenue collections, so that, you know, in this particular area, let's say there's a project there, you can tap on technology from the comfort of your room and be able to know how much money is being collected by who and where. There's a lot of revenue collected, but does it even get to the county government? It gets to some people who have been employed to collect revenues pockets. So there's so much money going our way when instead of coming to the central kitty. And this is where strengthening of revenue collection must be a key thing by the county government. As they ask for more from national government, let them also come up with ways to minimize, you know, some people, some vendors who are supposed to pay small taxes to the counties, they don't know they pay, but then it goes to some people who some of them are even ghost workers.
And Governor, when you listen to the conversations here, there are two areas. First, on development programs not being felt at the county level, that there's this argument that CDF is felt more on the ground. But secondly, on the question of the on-source revenue, and Kakamega would appear to be among the best performing at 76% of your target, or also in absolute terms, you're number 6 at 1.2 billion shillings against a target of 1.6 billion shillings. What is it that has been working, and what more can you do so that you shield yourselves from the misfortunes at the national level when it comes to availability of resources?
I think one of the things which we are doing is to enhance our on-source revenue, because when you look at the budget for this financial year, for example, we are talking about almost 15 billion Kenya shillings. And what we are getting from the National Treasury through the equitable share, excluding the conditional grants, is around 12 billion. Now, in Kakamega, I'm lucky to have inherited a county that has structures. So that is one of the strengths that we have. And we are also now moving forward to automate the revenue collection. Because there's also a lot of potential in revenue that can be collected from the counties. Some of it, of course, it has some impediments on the legislation. For example, on gold mining, that is one of the low-hanging fruits. We're just asking the National Assembly at least to pass the relevant legislation to fast-track the gold refineries, because once that is done, we have a lot of gold deposits in Ikolomani, which is in Kakamega. We are trying to see if that can be fast-tracked so that in the next financial year, our 20% that can be earned from the gold mining will also boost our revenue collection. So there are many other options we are proactively considering so that we can also enhance our on-source revenue. But what is more important is the National Treasury. When you are devolving functions, please, functions should be followed by resources. One of the conversations that we've been having, really, like the ECD, the function was devolved, but the function was stuck in the national government. We're also looking at other functions, and I support the Speaker of the Senate. All the functions which are devolved, why can they be devolved? And then we have the requisite funding. I know there's a conversation we've been having with the IGRTC, as per the Schedule 4 of the Constitution, that those functions, like roads, you will find most of the rural roads being done by national government. Why that is happening is another issue. So we need to be proactive enough. I know the President has pronounced himself to support all the devolved functions to be devolved. We've had a conversation before, and we are looking forward again. In the course of this week, we'll be having a summit, a meeting with him, so that we emphasize on devolving functions and resources thereof. But with regard to on-source revenue, all the governors have taken the initiative of making sure that we actually have automation. Once we seal some of the loopholes that we have, then it will also improve. Like in Kakamega, for example, in this financial year, we are targeting to collect at least 2 billion Kenya shillings by end of June. In the next financial year, we are more proactive. We must collect not less than 2 billion shillings because we have that potential. So that's the conversation that we are having. And also just to relook at the wage bill. I know we have the ceilings of spending not more than 35% of the revenues on wages. Right now in Kakamega we are doing almost 40%. So we are proactively looking at ways of reducing the wage bill so that more of the funds now can go into healthcare, which is one of my key proposals. We are looking at water, which of course is a constitutional requirement, and also the infrastructure. So there are quite a number of things which we have programmed so that we can transform Kakamega County. Thank you.
Right, but there's that question Honorable Ngui reflects about on that you don't feel the presence of the county government on the ground, that you feel CDF more. Is that factual?
I think it's not factual. I will advise Honorable Ngoi to visit Kakamega. When you come to Kakamega, you can feel the impact of devolution. It is actually felt, and this is something that you cannot hide. The infrastructure has really improved because my predecessor focused more on the infrastructure. Me, I'm going to focus more on the software, provision of health services, issues of water, and also, of course, not forgetting agriculture. But it may not be across the board because various governors have their development priorities. But for Kakamega, I want to confirm that you can feel the impact of devolution, especially on the infrastructure side.
Okay. I don't know if the rest of the counties, because each of you comes from a different county, Honorable Ngoi has expressed himself. But first, let's listen to some of the leaders as they spoke at that event that was also attended by the Deputy President, what they said about devolution of functions, but also the resources there.
The national government was the one to implement the health function. How much in this financial year would it incur? Then transfer that money to the county governments. So we will not even be talking about we have met the constitutional threshold of the 15% because we will have gone function after function.
It will be extremely important for your office to be a key interlink, at least administratively, between the Council of Governors and the Senate specifically.
And we would like governors to know, and I'm glad that my younger brother is here, Governor number 1. Have confidence in us. We are the ones who represent you. We are the ones who protect your interests, the interests of your government and the interests of your county. Have confidence in us. We will do a very, very good job.
Now, former Senator or Honorable Martha here, because your county, also Nakuru County, is one of the best performing in terms of on-source revenue, 86.2% in the financial year 2021-2022. Absolute terms is 1.7 billion shillings. Do you feel the presence of devolution on the ground? It's a big county, very many factors to consider, cosmopolitan in nature. But how would you rate them, or that county, in terms of implementing the dream of devolution?
I personally feel some, and this is just not for Nakuru, it's a general feeling that the amount we talk about that goes to the counties should do more than we are able to see. And I say that because let's even take, say, 14 billion now being channeled to Nakuru County. 14 billion can fund CDF for 3 years, for 290 constituencies, for 3 years. I can assure you that this should do much more than we are able to see. And I'll give you an illustration that when we get close to the elections, you will see these newspapers awash with adverts paid for by county government advertising what they have done. And my take is always that if you have done work and it is visible and it can be felt, you do not need to put it on the newspapers. And that I would say without fear. And I think what the governor for Kakamega has said, and we support, because generally there should be devolution of functions because the constitution is supreme and is the one that shares the resources. But are we pushing the devolution just so that we are able to control the resources, or are we pushing the devolution so that we can make a difference? Because have we excelled with the functions that we already have? So that we can ask for more. Is it just for control of resources and flexing muscles, or to perform? So I think generally, some is that we are in the 3rd generation of governors. We should definitely do better, because the first county governor said we have teething problems. We had even transitional authority to help with the transition. We now have another body called intergovernmental, I think something. So what are we still doing with the 3rd generation of governors talking the same problems we had in 2013? I think we have not grown as we should by now. We should be doing better. Systems should be running. And I think maybe Kakamega governor is lucky that he has found systems working. But I think there has to be a deliberate issue to confront the issue of human resources, the issue of pending bills with the counties, and the issue of corruption with the counties. That way, we'll get more money, go to things that are felt and are seen by mwananchi.
Honorable, you've said something that I'm trying to assess whether it's factual, that 14 billion shillings allocation to Nakuru County can finance CDF for 3 years?
Yes.
I don't think so, because the allocation for the current financial year for CDF is 44 billion shillings.
Oh, not 4 billion. It's 44 billion.
It is 44 billion shillings. So I think that's not accurate.
Yeah, I hear
but anyway, so for you, Senator Wakili Hilary Sigei, as you reflect on this, so then what do you think is the role that Senate has to play? Because every year, around this time up to June and about, we have to have this conversation. Why can't we just make it smooth so that everybody knows what they're supposed to be receiving and they can plan accordingly?
It is actually smooth some. Given the fact that there is law in place, all the way from the constitutional article 217 running through to 25 in terms of resource allocation to the county governments. That one is there. PFM Act is there. So it is a smooth process, especially because of the existing law. What we have as a challenge is the amount of disbursements based on every year's financial ability to remit that amount. But then the role of the Senate, as you've just asked, in terms of ensuring that the devolution works for the people, is easy as you listen to the speeches by the leadership of the Senate, ranging from the Speaker to the Majority Whip. Theirs was a commitment to support devolution, a commitment to do what it takes of the Senate to make sure that these counties get their disbursements in good time, a commitment by the Senate to make sure that in their desire for representation, they don't just merely represent, they also conduct oversight. And that is why they spoke about two issues. How do we ensure that functions which have been devolved are completely devolved? Functions which are supposed to be funded are to be funded and in good time, such that from where we sit as a Senate, devolution has gone through a complete cycle. The way my colleagues here have stated, we have had now governors who are back in the Senate as senators. They have been governors, they know how devolution has run. We have members of county assemblies now sitting in the Senate. We have members of county assemblies sitting as governors. So in essence, devolution has gone round, because we still have members of the National Assembly having gone to become governors, some have become senators. And we really cannot then say we are still talking of where we were before. The leadership cycle has gone round, and devolution, I would say, has gone through a complete cycle. What we have as a challenge is what the Honorable Basil said. There is a lot of pilferage of resources at the county level. That one I can tell you for a fact. In the course of my campaigns, I experienced a lot of those issues. And not only in one county, it is actually across, where in terms of people making sure that the resources that have been released to the counties indeed are utilized for the functions expected, it doesn't happen. When you see a county government advertising in the papers the way Mother says, why would you do it? Because at the end of the day, you can feel the effect of investments by the county government on the ground. You don't have to advertise it. But if you are not feeling, you might have to be forced to do it so that you show the people. But then, if we were then to say, let us fight this pilferage, there are two ways, in my own opinion, that we can do it. One, of course, is change of attitude. There is a lot of cliche way of doing things at the county level compared to the public, between the public and the private sector. That one is the biggest challenge that we do have. And of course, we will be fighting and saying we need to improve the resources which is being sent to the county governments. If we enhance them, it's like what Mother said. Do we want to control resources, or we want to make sure that the resources that come are utilized for the purpose of serving the local man, the mwananchi there? The biggest headache is the recurrent expenditure vis-a-vis the development. If you were to look at the compliance by the county governments, it's almost zero. There is no county government that has complied with that requirement of the law. And therefore, are we getting this money to pay salaries to the people, or we are getting this money to pay for services which lead to growth in terms of development and, by extension, growing the economy at the county level? And one last thing which I don't want to, it almost slipped off my mind. This issue about own source revenue. There was a study that was conducted sometimes back, I believe, by the county governments and the World Bank on comprehensive own source revenue potential by the county governments. At the moment, they are collecting 31 billion against a potential collection of 216 billion. If the county governments were to push their potential to maximize and get up to 100%. My county, as it now, is, I think, at around 46%, if I'm not wrong. And if we were to collect this own revenue and utilize it for purposes of development, where we have minimized the pilferages, because it is true, if you were collecting resources at the county level and getting into the pockets of individuals, those who are actually within the revenue department, it's not going to have any impact. Such that even if they push their potential to the 216 billion, but still they have not sealed the loopholes, that money will go into individuals. We will still be having the deficits of the resources that we expect. At the national level, at the county level, no development, no growth will be felt across the country. And that is going to last for as long as we are unwilling to retreat and say we can only do it if we make sure we minimize and, where possible, reduce and even get rid of pilferages and corruption that we have experienced.
Senator, you're right on how much the counties generated, 35.9 billion shillings, which is 59% of the annual target of 60.42 billion shillings. But you're wrong on your county. Your county attained 77.9% of the target. The target was 260 million shillings. They're able to collect 202 million shillings. But Honorable Ngoe, so as we get to the question of dealing with pilferage, what would you want to see, especially from the oversight bodies? You're talking about the county assembly, the Senate, and the other statutory institutions that do this.
Well, thank you, Sam. I think that's a good question. The issue is, you know, there should be independence of the oversight bodies for them to be able to perform their job. Because if you look at the county assemblies, there is a very thin balance between how they're supposed to ensure there is oversight and how at the same time, because you see some of the proceeds when it comes to, you know, sweet talking goes to the county assembly. I'm sorry to say that. And that's where we have a problem. Because you see, for some of the assemblies to pass the bills, they have to be spoken in a good way, and that is where they get some cuts, you know. And it needs a lot to be done, because for this country to move to the next level, as I've already said, we must be serious on corruption. Because we did devolution. The objective was to devolve development, but it looks like we devolved corruption. And these are things that we have to wake up if we have to be serious and to move Kenya to the next level. Because if you look at the amount of money that goes to county governments, if the money was used in a proper way, trust me, Kenya today will not be borrowing money. Would have actually be able to be self-reliant. I could give a good example in Tanzania. Initially, I used to work for the UN before, and I was posted in Tanzania when Tanzania was actually grappling with the corruption. And when the late Magufuli got to power, trust me, Tanzania was able to reverse the trend. Because initially, when I was in Tanzania, 95% of their money was from foreign aid. 5% of their budget used to come from revenue. But when Magufuli got to power, he changed that because he was committed to it. So if we get committed, and the president, because if you become committed to fight graft, trust me, you'll have so many enemies. So if President Ruto will get committed to fight graft, he will have so many enemies. But he has to stand strong. Myself, as a member of parliament, I'll support anyone who will fight corruption, because that is where we have a problem.
Governor, I want to give you the final word, because I'm looking at the Control of Budgets report about the counties, and specifically to your county, and the absorption rate appears to have been, or rather, the actual receipts of the money from the exchequer was 92% for the previous financial year. I'll look at the absorption rate later on, but it's higher for recurrent expenditure and lower for development programs. If you had to reflect on the current financial year, how has been the releases to your coffers so far?
First, I want to say that we've had delays in terms of release of money to counties. So far, we have arrears of almost 75 billion Kenya shillings. 20 counties have not received the allocation for the month of November, amounting to almost 14 billion shillings. No county has received allocation for December and January. Now, I know the National Treasury has always used the absorption rate as a basis for disbursing funds. And we disagree with that approach because when we have balances in the CRF account, there is actually a delay that comes from the control of budget in terms of now approving the specific transfers to the facilities account. So what you are saying is when the monies are supposed to be released to the counties, it should not be based on absorption, because the continuous delay in the release of funds, by the end of the financial year, we are going to have a lot of pending bills. So we need to have a long-lasting solution, because the perennial challenge of pending bills is caused by the delays in the release of funds. Because it's not proper for governors to be borrowing money to finance recurrent expenditure because of the delays in the release of money. With regard to the projects, of course, because of the delays in the release of money, the projects also take time to be completed. You'll find that a project that was supposed to be done maybe within 3 years is now done in 4 or 5 years. And that becomes expensive because of the inherent costs. I think once we look at and get a long-lasting solution with regard to the release of funds to counties, we'll be happy even if we have a delay for, let's say, a month. That will make sense. But 3 months delay, that is not acceptable, because it is a perennial challenge which will definitely lead to having a lot of pending bills. But so far, I know the National Treasury is trying to style up, but we're still expecting them at least to release monies up to December. Right now we are doing February. There is no funds received for November. December, no funds have been received. January, no funds have been received. And yet we are supposed to carry out activities. It is not possible.
Governor, when is the last time?
And that's why that conversation, we need to have it very clear.
Okay.
And I know it's one of the areas that we'll be addressing with the President during the summit that is slated for later this week.
And Governor, when is the last time you paid salaries in your county?
Now, of course, we just have to do what we call financial engineering. I paid salaries for the month of January, but through borrowing. Because, you know, the staff members cannot understand why they're not paid salaries on time. So you are forced as counties to have some financial arrangements with the banks through borrowing.
Okay.
But that is also expensive in the long run. Yeah.
Wow, and how does that work? Do you require any approval from the assembly, or you can just do it as the executive?
Now, of course, you know, this one you do it as the executive. It's a short-term borrowing. You know, when you have, this is what you call the relationship management. You can have a relationship with the bank so that you have a short-term borrowing. And that's why you'll find us pushing the National Treasury to release the monies on time. Because any delay in the release of the funds will definitely become expensive to us. We, of course, the first charge is on-source revenue.
Right.
We use part of the on-source revenue to settle some of the urgent bills. But the payroll costs are very high. They cannot be taken care of by on-source revenue. And that's why the borrowing aspect comes in on a short-term basis. Yeah.
Okay, and you just mentioned the on-source revenue. I'm just wondering, because the requirement would have been that you deposit it with your accounts at the National Treasury or Central Bank, I don't know, you can clarify for us. But are you able to spend at source, or you have to wait until that other cycle of processing?
Now, you cannot spend at source. All the monies which are collected are supposed to be transferred to the account revenue fund account, the CRF. We are now trying to come up with, like for health, for example, the Facilities Improvement Fund, which once the county assembly approves, we can be able to spend at source. But that now you cannot spend at source. All the monies are actually sent to the CRA account.
Okay.
And then you get approval for the same now to be sent to the facilities. Those are some of the legal ramifications that we believe should be dealt with, so that we make life easy for the counties. Because you can imagine you are collecting money, you have to send it to the CRF account. Then you get approval from COB to spend. I think for me, we have come of age. Those are some of the things which, when we have a summit, in the next IBEC summit, we are going to have a conversation on how to improve on the efficiency of the funds management. Because it is actually unnecessarily causing delays for counties. You collect money, you send to the CRF account, you have to wait for COB to approve before you start spending. It's unnecessary and it causes unnecessary inefficiency.
And lastly, Governor, so for instance, assuming it's July, and the last July 2023, and the last disbursement you received was in March 2023, and there are certain development projects that you had scheduled to execute. So what happens when you eventually need to meet those costs? Do you have to go through another cycle, or you just receive the money and spend?
Now, of course, when you now cross to the next financial year, and you have development projects which have not yet been paid for, definitely will have pending bills. The worst case scenario, you've seen even contractors abandoning site because you have not paid. And that's why the synchrony between activities and the release of funds should be synchronized, so that when you have maybe a lag of 1 or 2 months, it makes sense. But largely, development projects suffer because you cannot borrow for development projects. And that's why, as counties, we're even having a conversation with the National Treasury to allow counties even to enjoy part of the national debt. The ceiling is 10 trillion Kenya shillings. It's only Laikipia that has even attempted to have a bond. So that's a conversation maybe which we need to have with the National Treasury. So that part of the monies that you are collecting should also go to counties and support the development agenda through borrowing, for as long as we have the necessary administrative structures and legislation. I think that would be a big way to support the counties, especially on the development budget. But equitable share on development will always have a delay and pending bills.
Thank you so much, Governor. We'll continue to engage and find out what's happening in the counties. But quickly look at the feedback that has come to us via Twitter. Citizen TV Kenya, Tam Gituku, the hashtag to use is Daybreak. Engineer Lazaro is saying that 3/4 of private schools, this is based on our earlier conversation, 3/4 of private schools in the country lack proper infrastructure and can't host junior secondary schools. Government should aid them in order to ease congestion in public schools. Okay. One guest here doesn't believe. Remy Butia, from an economic perspective, Kenya has a substantial potential to sustain herself as well as emancipate herself from the burden of debts through taxes, and all Kenyans should have an opportunity to contribute to the kitty. All right. Who else? This is J.M. Musoma. Governors should just push for constitutional amendment to stipulate the minimum they should be allocated on national budgets, lest they stay in the masses of national government. These are some of the issues BBI sought to address, and you may need to begin that conversation. Wow, all right. Godi Barazawere, the Azimio political wing should understand that the business of our nation is largely powered by the tax collected from its citizens. Inciting people to refrain or to be exempted from paying the same tax will only cripple our country. Sawe, you're saying that corruption plagues county governments where mismanagement of funds is a daily occurrence and the ordinary citizen doesn't get value for money. Devolution aims to bring growth to rural areas, but the opposite is true. Few individuals benefit. Okay. Bob Otieno, you're saying that governors are demanding for more money, but local people on the ground don't benefit or see any major development. For instance, look at health sector, a total mess which they have failed to handle. And of course, so many concerns about especially some of those services that are very essential for the citizens. There has been promises, political promises on what to do with how much money should be devolved to the counties. It was a percentage. We'll continue looking at that and the efforts being made to ensure that becomes a reality. Thank you all. Governor Fernandez Baraza from Kakamega, Senator Wakili Hilary Sigei from Bomet, MP, what is it? Martha Wangari, she's surprised that you are ending.
Yes.
And Robert Ngoi from Yata constituency. Thank you all for making time for us. We'll have this again some other time. Bye for now. My name is Sam Gituku.